Welcome to this very special edition of The Interview. Special because today's guest was actually the subject of a video I did just 2 days ago titled The Ministry of Conformity, Inequity and Exclusion. I speak, of course, of the now infamous New York University professor Michael Rectenwald. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, Michael, I have to ask you straight off the bat, how is your mental condition? Because reports are that you've been put on leave for the rest of the semester because of mental issues.
Yeah, well, tell you the truth, I'm having a lot of dread with reference to the people in my department and my return to the university. I think I might need a safe space office away from my colleagues to protect me from their vile, bilious vituperation.
I think one of the words used was about you was incivility. And
oh yes, incivility. I was incivil because I made statements that they did not like.
Incivility. And another interesting word was illogic, I thought.
That's a really peculiar word to be used by people from the SJW left. Logic is hardly their forte, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of a point I made in the video that seemed to be strange.
And they also said I silenced them, and that I was gaslighting them. Meanwhile, I wasn't even talking to them. I don't know where they got this idea that I was referring to them. I'm sorry, you may not feel significant by virtue of my saying this, but this had nothing to do with you. Nothing. Okay?
Yeah. So, so there are some people who obviously probably haven't seen my first video. So could you take us back to how this all began?
Yes. What happened was, to give you the real deep history here, is I had a kerfuffle on one of my Facebook posts because I posted a link to the article in which the student, I think it was at Michigan, the University of Michigan, I think, who when he was offered to give his own pronoun, he stated His Majesty. And
that's right.
I posted that on Facebook. To my chagrin, I was busy, and before I knew it, there were thousands of comments and people denouncing me and saying that I had betrayed them and that I was all manner of horrible. I didn't even post a comment, but by virtue of putting this link up, I was homophobic, I was transphobic, I was every kind of phobic there is.
Yeah.
And all I did is post a link, which I thought was quite funny, to tell you the truth, because the kid was exploiting the administrative folly of allowing people to pick whatever pronoun they want. I mean, that was just absurd. So the kid exploited it, and he wasn't so much making fun of anybody like trans people. He was making fun of the administration.
Yeah.
So I saw it.
Yeah.
And it was a brilliant move. Frankly, it should have been rewarded. But but I was not rewarded for posting it, I tell you that. And so I got disgusted after that, and I said, you know what, I just can't stand this anymore. I'm so sick of genuflecting before these people and their precious identities. It's like, if they have the right identity, that is the wrong identity, so to speak, they say it's wrong so that it can be right. They say it's low so that it can be high. You see, everything is crazy. It's this inverted hierarchy that they are establishing, right? So they put themselves at the bottom, so when it's flipped over, they're at the top. This craziness, I said, I can't take it anymore. So I was talking to my friend Lori, who has the site legitgov.org. She has a really good news site, by the way. And I was saying, I've got to do something. I got to express myself somehow. I'm just going crazy.
Yeah.
And so I put up this Twitter account, which was just a complete charade. In other words, this was basically, shall I say, it was a non-diplome, of course, but it was also like a character I was making.
Sure.
And it was kind of like, I'd even say, I've even characterized it as it was a costume, if you will,
Sure.
like a Halloween costume. So I hope it doesn't trigger you, but if it does, too bad. Okay. Anyway, I've made this character. I used the Nietzsche icon because Nietzsche would be, Nietzsche, if he were alive today, imagine Nietzsche trying to do a campus tour. It'd be canceled every time.
Yeah, he'd be worse
right?
than Milo Yiannopoulos, yeah.
Much worse. So that was just an irony that I was trying to exploit, using a great philosopher who's well-known and so forth, but, who couldn't speak if he was alive today. He'd probably be killed. And I never thought anything would come of this thing. I made a few tweets here and there, but what do you know? A New York University student who's a journalist for Washington Square News, that's the student newspaper, discovers the icon and starts communicating to me through it.
Yeah.
And so I said, all right, I'll do an interview. The idea was it might be anonymous, it might not. I wasn't sure.
Uh-huh.
It depends on how things went. And I did the interview, and I thought, I said so many brilliant things. I want to take credit for it. So that was, I'm sort of kidding, but I'm not kidding really. I did feel that way, and I thought, this would be a shame if I gave this away to Anonymous.
Yeah.
So I took credit for it. I let her put my name on it, and what do you know? I put this interview in there, and basically I don't say anything. What I think is, there's nothing horrid. I said I'm not against diversity. What I'm against is these mechanisms being established to so-called promote diversity, which I think are actually cringing upon it, impinging upon it, rather, and actually limiting it and curtailing it in so many ways.
Sure.
I mean, certainly diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, these things are all being curtailed dramatically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the conservative intellectual Thomas Sowell has said that he said if a professor ever talks to you about diversity, ask him how many conservatives he has in his humanities department. Because
I mean, it's we're talking, it's verboten to be anything but the identity politics left. Anything but. And I'll go into that later. What are the other possibilities? There are other leftist possibilities.
Yeah.
They have driven me almost out of the whole of it, though, I gotta say. So this gave the interview. Then that committee that you responded to so brilliantly, that committee of 12, which consists of 2 deans, several faculty members, and then the real coup de grace, two or three students, which means I've hurt some students now, right? So that's the worst thing you could possibly do, right? So they reply as if I've talked to them. They had nothing to do with it. It was, and their reply is, quite frankly, quite uncongenial, uncollegial as well. Just rude. I don't know what the hell they were saying and why they said it. Why did they say I was silencing them when they spoke after I did? You would think that to silence somebody, you have to actually get the last word, right? I mean, how could I silence them? And then gaslighting them? What are they talking about? I'm driving them crazy? That because I said something was crazy, that they think that means that I'm driving them crazy.
Well, it's
or I'm gaslighting them. This is just, I looked it up, and these are memes. These are just memes that are out there all the time. So these people in this social justice warrior left, they don't think. All they do is multiply memes. They don't think thoughts. They don't have thoughts.
No, because
these are just memes. They stack up. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, because they're in possession of the truth already. I mean, of course they don't have to think. Everything to them is a nail, and they're the hammer that has to be to smash it down. The diversity hammer. Because I think you said silencing there, but my point of that video was using your situation to sort of say you have to look at social justice warriors when they say things like diversity and inclusion, is to really think of them as either opposites of what they mean or definitely bastardized in some way. It may not be the complete opposite, but so silencing is, that you're silencing them. No, they're actually trying to silence you. That's what's happening.
Isn't that ironic? That's right. They're saying I'm silencing them, but really their whole communication is an attempt to silence me. And then the next day, no, I should say the same day that their missive came out in the newspaper, as a reply to me, that same day, I got an email from my dean while I was teaching, and I just so happened to see it, and it said, "Can you come in real quickly at 2:00?" I'm sorry.
Right.
I said, "Yes, I think I know why." Right?
Yeah.
Already, like I'm infamous at this point already, right? I'm looking around, I'm walking around the halls going to my classes, and these other professors are giving me weird looks. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Something's happening here. Yeah.
Dead man walking.
Exactly. I'm starting to get these dirty looks from people I've never met. And so I go up to the office, and this is where the tricky part, and I have to be very careful here, but in no uncertain terms, it comes out that I'm going to take a leave of absence. Mm-hmm. And the Washington Post, the New York Post. The New York Post kind of flubbed the headline and said I was out. I wasn't out. I wasn't unpaid or anything like that. And NYU maintains to this moment that there's no connection between the leave and my statements or my Twitter thing. Nothing at all. So just leave it like that. And then if I'll just say that's a statement, I'm just going to leave there, and I'm not going to say anything else about it. But so then, the press starts rolling, and all these articles are, get all these interviews. I mean, the requests were just, I couldn't keep up with them.
So I was just going to say it's odd because I, as I said in my video, I missed it, and probably because there was this little thing going on at the time called the presidential election. I think we were like a week out.
I forgot about that. That was my mistake. I should have known.
You were going to be over.
This might not be the best time to come out against the social justice warriors who are going to be going into paroxysms very shortly, right?
Yeah, I wonder. Because I wonder if, post the election result, perhaps the feeling or the climate would have been a little different. I'm not sure. But was your university one of those universities that, canceled exams or had safe spaces for people?
I was already out by then for the leave.
All right.
So, but I was told from some students off the record, and I don't think that this matters because I'm not going to say who it was, that things were very tense, and that it was very, very unfriendly for anybody but, the liberal left, Hillary. If you were a Trump supporter, you don't even breathe it, a word of it, or you're dead.
Right.
Who knows what would happen to you? Seriously.
Yeah, it's. I think this is just so bizarre to most people who don't follow this sort of thing or are not part of the academy. They just don't have any idea out there in the general public just how absurd it's gotten on campus.
How absurd and how intense. These are some of the. I should say, I'm fairly, I'm an upper middle age man. These are the scariest people I've ever met. Okay. Yeah. These SJWs, they are the most terrifying people on the planet to me. I'm serious. I'd rather go up against ISIS. At least ISIS, I know what the fucking weapons are going to be, but.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about your story is that in the particular article I cite, it says that your views are, your conservative views are counter to the liberal state of this campus, but in reality, you are not a conservative. Could you just describe sort of where you, or at least where you used to be on the political spectrum?
When I went into this washing machine, I was left communist, and let me spell that out. It's a libertarian communist. So it's a very libertarian left. And that is, the basic position there is what was wrong with the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, et cetera, is A, they weren't necessarily socialist, but B, they were authoritarian. Even the Bolsheviks were authoritarian right from almost the start. And so, that was my position. It has, it had been, I should say, for quite a while. And the only reason I think I started getting pegged as a conservative is because no one else was complaining about these social justice warriors but conservatives, I think.
Right.
And so for somebody to come out against these social justice warriors, not from the conservative position, was probably baffling. And the people that have attacked me, I've really found out who my friends and who my enemies are. I got to be honest.
Sure.
I was a member of a loose affiliation with a particular group. It was called Insurgent Notes, and it's a left communist group, very much like, in keeping with the views that I held. But it's very, very loose association, and I wrote for them occasionally, and I was attacked viciously by members of that organization for, quote, making common cause with the right.
Yeah.
Now, I did make common cause with the right, to be frank. That common cause that I held with the right, and I'll still hold with the right if that's the only people that are going to ask for it, is the right to say what I want. Okay? I mean, if the right is the only group that's helping support that position, then yes, I make cause with them. And because this is more fundamental than these political positions, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea that freedom of speech is a right-wing conservative idea, this doesn't really stack up in a historical context.
Bizarre. It's bizarre. But I mean, I understand why. It's the right has been persecuted in the university. There's no question about it. Anybody that would deny that is a liar, or else they're just looking at things through some so much thick ideological lenses that they can't see, because it's true. There's no question in my mind. I would be terrified if I were right wing on campus. I would be more terrified than I am being left communist. But
so this is a classic case of the left eating itself. I mean, you are of the left. I mean, I don't know where you are today, but I mean, this is and happening more and more often. I think these types of incidents.
Yeah, well, they do this. They do this to each other, and you can see it if you follow Twitter, or if you follow any SJWs on Facebook, Twitter, or I think mostly what's the one social networking site they're mostly on?
Twitter?
No, Tumblr. Tumblr. Tumblr is from what I understand, Tumblr is a nightmare.
Yeah, it's the cancer of the internet.
You see them attacking each other left and right? So they call you out, they call somebody out, and then there's the call out, then the pile on, right? That's what they do. Call out, pile on. It's nuts. They're just nuts. And it's all, I love this phrase, virtue signaling. I don't care that it's being used by people on the alt-right. I don't give a shit. It's funny. They're virtue signaling all the time. That's all they are doing. It's all about saying how wonderfully non-racist I am compared to you. And so if I have to call you a racist to make myself exonerated from racism, then I'm going to do it. And that's all that's what they do. These people spend days and nights on this.
Yeah, it's the moral superiority, isn't it? They need to feel, and once they've asserted, and it is only assertions, of course, there's no evidence. It's just asserted, I'm morally better than you, so therefore I can tell you to shut up, and you don't have a voice. But the funny thing is,
it's all linguistics. There's no real. It's all linguistic emancipation. Sure. There's no real emancipation of anybody. They're all just talking, So I mean, you don't see them except now, I guess, with the protests against Trump. You don't see them doing much else,
No. But isn't it interesting, though, that all the things that they stand for, which, like diversity, like inclusion, these are the kinds of words they use. But actually, when you drill down and look at what they're doing, and this is everywhere, they're doing the opposite of those things. So, for example, I'll give you an example, maybe you've heard this one, that the BBC in the UK have come out with a new diversity plan for to 2020, and they've set all these targets. For example, like there has to be 20% black people and other ethnicities. There has to be a certain percentage of disabled people. There has to be a certain 50% have to be women. These are people I think that are on air, journalists facing the camera. Certain amount of LGBTQ whatever it's up to now. And so this is called inclusion, and yet to get this type of inclusion, you have to naturally exclude other people. And so the idea of inclusion is actually it's an inversion, because what you're doing is you have to exclude a whole bunch of people, and at the top of the list is usually white males. These are the ones that are excluded the first. And in a place like the UK, of course, white males are going to comprise a significant portion of the population. So your actual policy is, whereas before, when you don't have a diversity policy, everyone can apply for the job regardless of race, sexuality, or sexual orientation. But now that you have these targets, you are going to, by definition, be excluding people based on those identity categories.
Another thing that's happening there is the policies of the organization are actually going to predominate, so much so that if you don't accept the policies philosophically, then you're excluded as well. So in other words, and same thing is going on in the universities, where I want to ask a question of like the administration, but I don't think they're ready to answer this yet. Let me ask you, are your policies my philosophy? Is this what's happening here? Because it seems to be that's what's necessary. They want their policies have to be your philosophy. So that's, if you don't, so that already is completely hegemonic. If you don't abide by that, you're finished.
And of course, diversity, of course, is a nice sounding word, and everybody says, yes, that's great, but diversity, the way they see it, is, of course, extremely narrow. There's no intellectual diversity. For example, as you just said, if you have a different, the idea, the line that you used, I think was fantastic. Academic freedom is great as long as you don't exercise it. It kind of sums it up. So there's no diversity of opinion, which is really the only diversity that actually matters at the end of the day.
It's very scary. I've always taught and thought that I would be, that I'm as a professor, I never proselytize. Okay. So I have always made it very, very strict in terms of that. I'm not trying to lead students to a particular end. Right. I have seen on Facebook, for example, one of my Facebook friends was boasting that by the end of the semester, all of her students had become Marxist feminists.
Oh, God.
She announced this in a great celebratory statement. And then all her friends start saying, oh, isn't that wonderful? And they're congratulating her. It's like basically they're blowing horns and so on and so forth. And then I jumped on. Yeah, I jumped on and I begged to differ. I begged to differ big time. And I gave her some serious grief. I said, I don't believe in any teleological teaching model where I'm trying to lead students to a particular goal. That's outrageous, in my opinion. I think it's criminal, in effect.
Well, this is a stated aim, though. A lot of, I think are you aware of Jordan Peterson case?
Sure. Been reading and watching him.
Yeah, he said that if you, and I haven't done this, but I have done it here in Australia with a couple of academics, but a lot of, if you go to sort of women's studies courses and things like that, gender studies, you will find a stated aim that they're trying to produce activist students. That's one of the goals. I mean, it's not even hidden. I mean, it's out there in plain sight, and that is truly frightening.
Yeah, and speaking of gender studies or women's studies, of course, there's a particular viewpoint about what gender is and how it is constructed, and that is, if you do not toe this line, you're out. I mean, as a student, I guess it's pretty severe that basically the whole process of so-called education there is an inculcation of a particular it's an indoctrination process. It has nothing to do with education, because some of the things that they're actually claiming they're just not possibly true.
Yeah.
They're just not possible. That gender has nothing to do with biology. Okay, go
Yeah.
for that. I mean, this is just absurd. The absurdity of, I forget who it was that said, it's not only is it possible for a person to be wrong, it's possible for a whole generation to be wrong. It's possible for a whole era to be wrong. And that's what we've got.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of wrong people, and this is the orthodoxy you must ingest. And if you don't ingest this, you're gone. I don't know what happens to you. I don't even touch these topics in my teaching. I don't touch them.
Right. So you've written a few articles, and I'm going to put up a link to your page of academic articles and other writings. But one of your recent articles, the one that you sent to me to get me to read, was about how the failure of postmodernism, really, I think was the gist of it. And that, could you, because this is an area where I'm going to get out of my depth, but could you explain sort of how this sort of movement has sprung out of postmodernism and where it's gone wrong and why it's wrong?
Yeah, I think that it is really this what we're talking about with the SJWs. I think this really does come out of postmodern theory, the postmodern left, if you will, and the postmodern left began, I would argue, and some are going to argue against me. I would argue it began with the Frankfurt School.
Yeah.
With that school of that people love to call the cultural Marxists, right? And rail upon the cultural Marxists, but it was with Adorno and Horkheimer and what's his name?
Weber?
No, Weber was earlier. Marcuse and others. So what began in with a book called The Dialectic of Enlightenment, I think. And in that book, they take aim at, they make a very serious critique of Enlightenment rationality. And this begins the whole attack against, Enlightenment rationality that is the postmodern moment. And everything comes under attack. Language comes under attack. Of course, the patriarchy comes under attack. Rationality itself comes under attack. All these things are subject to critique.
Yep.
And you start to have these, and of course we get this radical relativism, an epistemology that begins with a standpoint epistemology and becomes, which is a standpoint epistemology, which is at first a notion that there are different perspectives that say the working class particularly has a certain perspective that allows them access to objective reality. It starts there, and it turns into the abandonment of objectivity altogether. Mm-hmm. Objectivity just out the window. There is no objectivity in postmodernism, so you don't have anything like truth is not possible. It's just a construct of language, according to Derrida, and so on and so forth. And
that's even so. Today, you see a manifestation, for example, the cultural relativism of this crisis in Europe as refugees walking across borders, and half the population is kind of going, hold on a minute, and the elites are sort of, they've embraced this cultural relativism. All cultures are equal. There's nothing different. Cultural relativism.
Did I say cultural relativism? I meant epistemological.
No, you didn't.
Relativism.
I put that in there. So that's my mistake.
All right. Yeah, cultural relativism. Yeah, I mean, we've seen that just recently with the statement made by Trudeau of Canada. What did he say? Something so absurd, such a cultural relativism, such a relativistic statement. He was like basically suggesting, I have to look it up, but the idea of something absurdly relativistic such that we can't criticize. I think something about Islam, but I better be careful. I'll look it up later. But the idea that, there's no, there's no standpoint from which we could actually make a statement of truth about anything, and we can't critique another culture because every culture is supposedly equal to every other culture. So that's, so there's no, we can't criticize, oh, that's what it was, honor killing. He actually said honor killing was just a part of somebody's culture, of Indian culture, so it can't be really critiqued. It's part of their culture. So, so this is absurd because it runs counter to, of course, the human rights that we claim are much more fundamental. Individual human rights become bulldozed underneath of cultural relativism. This is the thing.
Yeah.
So something that's much more fundamental comes into conflict with this new group rights notion, or group or cultural rights, if you will, if you want to say, like, particular cultures have a right to any kind of practice that they want to undertake. Yeah, right. Give me a break.
Well, it's of course completely antithetical to sort of the American system, which was individual liberty, and that the tyranny of the majority cannot overrun the minority. That's
right.
That's the way the system was set up, especially to do it. So I feel like if America can't resist this this movement, then I don't know that there's much hope for the rest of the world, because America's system, in theory, is at least set up to combat exactly this kind of authoritarianism.
That's right. That's what we've got going, is a kind of cultural authoritarianism in the name of so-called subalterns, or those who are beneath and outside, the so-called marginalized. Everything in their name, and there's this massive cultural bulldozer that's been affected, and it's on the roll. And this, this is very dangerous. And the dangerous thing is the claims that are underneath it, that this is really all being done for and in the name of the disenfranchised, the marginalized, the those who are subject to phobias and hatred and blah blah blah. So I mean, it's in their name, all these atrocities. I think, well, at least right now, what we have is rhetorical and intellectual and academic and cultural atrocities. But what might become worse, and I think that the reaction to the Trump election, for example, is going to be worse than Trump by far. I mean, I'm more nervous about the reaction to Trump than I am to Trump, to be really frank. I know that makes me a complete pariah on the left, but I'm sorry.
Well, but I mean, isn't it? But I think that's exactly the correct take, because I mean, this idea that Trump, I mean, the most idiotic and go-to argument of the left right now is that Trump is Hitler. Trump is the new Hitler, and just by virtue of the fact the way the American system works, you can't imagine that the president could actually. It just couldn't get that far. I mean, maybe that's just a failure of imagination on my part, but it seems that the system will constrain him to a certain extent. And even if you just look at the cabinet appointments he's made so far, I mean, some of them, you've got to say, yes, Steve Bannon is maybe problematic, but there are some decent appointments in there, and we will see if he appoints Romney or not. He's not hiring the Gestapo to come into the White House. And the exact opposite of what the left said is what they were doing. They said that if Trump was elected, then there'd all be all these hate crimes against gay people, against women, against minorities. But it's the left that's doing them. The left
against Trump people,
yeah. It was, instead of the left being a warning, it was actually a promise on their part, that because they are the ones that have ended up. For example, look at the attacks on Melania Trump. Now, that protest outside of Trump Tower, there was someone was holding up a sign that said "Rape Melania."
I saw that. I mean, and did you imagine? Can you imagine that nobody there said anything? They didn't put the sign. They didn't go after the guy and say, "Take that sign down. That's outrageous." No, instead, here's the group that's all about women and the possibility of rape culture and all this, and here they have a person calling for the rape of somebody, and because that person is on the other side of their political aisle, they're willing to sanction that. They're actually they're willing to actually accept that. That's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
It's just such a self-refutation. I just can't believe they actually don't notice these things, and there's so many contradictions like that.
Yeah. Well, I have a saying that to become, I used to say this just about feminists, but I guess it sort of applies to all social justice warriors, which is that when you become a feminist or a social justice warrior, you have to have that part of your brain removed that regulates consistency and hypocrisy, because otherwise you can't operate.
Yeah, that's true. Now, there is earlier feminism, like, the feminism of Christina Hoff Sommers, and she's a second wave feminism and she's dead set against these people too. Trust me.
Yeah.
They drove her out of the academy many years ago. So,
it's strange, isn't it? Because almost everything, I mean, pretty much, I can't think of a thing. Everything she says is just eminently sensible.
Right.
I think she calls herself an equity feminist, and when she uses the word equity, she actually uses the real meaning of the word equity, not the
right. And then she calls the other third wave feminists the fainting couch feminists.
Yes, it's very good.
Because it's all about their being invalid, And this is one of the key themes that I put forth in my first interview on this topic with Washington Square News, and they really called me out on this. Is the sense of this production of a culture of invalids, this production of a culture of people that are, that are infirmed, and the whole university is in effect a hospital, right? Because everybody needs bandages for their psychic wounds, and each room is basically a safe space for them away from others who are in other safe spaces,
Yeah. The complete opposite of the academy. I mean, maybe, I don't know if I don't know how much you've thought about this, but I watched a recent interview with Jordan Peterson where he actually said, and this is a distinguished professor, that perhaps universities are now doing more harm than good.
I saw that.
As a whole.
I saw him say that, yes. That was pretty interesting. Not being tenured, I'm not going to say it.
But I mean, I guess
I could say it's worth it if they just come to my class. That's it.
Right. So there are pockets of reality and objectivity still out there if they can find it. But I guess the hard sciences have not been infected yet. But sooner or later, they're going to try and come after them. Surely.
Well, they did try back, in the 90s. There was the science wars, right? And Alan Sokol, of course, headed them off with the Sokol hoax, right?
Right.
So that there was an attempt for this left to burrow their way in to the sciences and undermine it epistemologically, and so on and so forth. But it didn't work. That was thankful. Of course, we do, though. There was a recent paper about feminism and icebergs. I don't know if you heard about this.
Yes, yeah.
This is always got a lot of funding for that, too.
Yeah, I did see that article, and I remember reading how much they got. It was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think
hundreds of thousands, if I remember. Yes.
Yeah.
To write a feminist study of glaciology, I don't know, of glaciers. Unbelievable. What are they talking about?
No, most people don't.
What are they talking about?
Most people don't.
I'm sorry.
No. Most people don't see those type of articles, but then it does percolate up into the culture when you have someone like Hillary Clinton saying that the biggest victims in war are women and children. It's like, forget about the men that actually die on the battlefield. The absurdities that come up, because it's the same victimhood mentality that the feminists can't. They are the central player and the victim in every single narrative of Western society. So glaciers melting, they're the ones that are most affected. I don't know if you saw the article where it was a feminist article about how cities are set up for men. They're not set up for women.
Yes, I saw that too.
Um,
I saw that too.
I mean,
Yeah.
can you identify when, because there was a time, correct me if I'm wrong, where feminism was when it said it was about empowerment of women, it really was. It was kind of, look, you can go out and do anything. You can
Right.
study, you can be anything you like. And this was probably back in the time. I went to university at a time in the early 90s when the crossover between, when women sort of reached parity at university.
Yeah.
And so the message was that, yeah, women can do anything too. You can study this, you can be that, you can be an engineer and whatnot. And so that was actually a empowering kind of message.
Yeah,
But
sure.
the message
So that second wave, access is the issue there. Yeah.
Right. But of course, the access is not enough for this generation. They focus on equality of outcome. And so so if they see, for example, that women only represented at 25 or 30% in STEM subjects, to them that's a problem. That can't have come about because women make different decisions, because of course biology doesn't exist and there are no differences.
Yeah,
so
right.
this is a problem that needs a solution.
There's more to it. They also want to undermine the basic fundamentals, the epistemological fundamentals of science and all these other fields by suggesting that science and all the engineering or whatever is it's patriarchal, and that science is this they come up with all these metaphors about science being like this penetration of nature, sort of using all these sexual metaphors to describe these fields, right?
Yeah.
So that they not only want access, now they want to actually take the fields and turn their epistemologies on their heads, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it is a real undermining of the actual fields themselves, not just access to women. Women now want to abolish the patriarchy in these fields.
Yes, and science is patriarchal, so therefore it needs to be abolished as well. We need a feminist science. I've seen that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, feminist science, definitely. that goes to the 90s. Sandra Harding and her feminist. It was called The Science Question in Feminism. I think it was 93 or maybe 97. I don't know, somewhere in there.
Because I've heard Camille, maybe you've seen Christina Hoff Sommers and Camille Paglia recently did a couple of sort of sit-down discussions when they talk for about an hour and 15 minutes. Really, really interesting stuff. And they said that they were there in the 90s and they kind of squashed this victimhood feminism, and they thought that they'd achieved some kind of victory. But actually what happened is it went underground and it infiltrated the academy sort of quietly. And now we are seeing the sort of results of that bubbling to the surface in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Because where did this SJW stuff come from? It seems like it's only been around 5, maybe 8 years at best in the academy. So it was underground for a while. It got pushed underground I think it lurked in the corners, the cobwebby corners of the internet, and then recycled and came back for another round. And it's it's gained quite a lot of force in the interim.
Yeah, and it's got much more. It's not just that academics, but it's the administrations at universities, isn't it? I mean, it's infiltrated. So much.
The administrations are just speaking this. They're just speaking. They may as well be writing feminist texts in 1995. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're using the same language. They've gone hook, line, and sinker. They're completely down with this. They speak social justice warrior-ese. That's what administrations speak now. That's their language.
It's horrible, isn't it? There was a quote I heard recently by do you know the conservative I don't know if we'd call him an intellectual, Douglas Murray from the UK. Now, and he brought up he was on a podcast with Sam Harris recently, and I say maybe a few months back, and he made the observation that in the 60s, in the free speech movement that sort of came out of Berkeley and other places in California, that there was a question of it, why did the administrations let this happen? And this wasn't his question, he was quoting someone else, and he said that it applies more to today than it did in the 60s. That how have the administrations and sort of the faculties, just why have they allowed this to happen? Mm-hmm. And is the answer because they don't represent the old guard? They are part of this revolution.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a real good reason for it. It has to do with this. The social justice warrior needs and requires more administration. They need ministered to in all ways possible. So it reproduces this administration just keeps reproducing and multiplying, right? And so the more identity types you recognize, the more administrators you need. You need an administrator for gays. You need an administrator for trans. You need bis. You need non-bis. You need non-binaries. You need somebody for everything, right? So before you know it, you get this massive flowering and reproduction and growth of administration, and social justice warrior mentality and philosophy just feeds it. It just perfectly feeds it. Yeah. It's a field day for administrators, right? It's a feast. So
so if there's a solution to this, to stop this metastasizing cancer from growing, I mean, I don't know what the setup is in the United States, but most universities accept some form of public funding, do they not?
Most do, yeah. And especially through the students, the student loans and student grants and all that. And in fact, everybody's getting funding, yeah.
Yeah, and so
federal funding. But the federal government is totally down with this too, at least now. Who knows what'll happen if Trump tries to go against it. It's going to be a huge response, you know. Yeah. It'll be, and then if you try to support the opposition, of course, you're going to be accused of being everything, a Nazi or whatever. Sure, you're just going to be one of these, you know, you'll be alt-right, you'll be whatever they want to call you. They start calling me all kind of names. I never said a racist word in my life. And I was called a racist because I opposed this because I wrote a few things on this social justice warrior movement. Unbelievable.
The way, I mean, the only good thing about that is because they label everyone a racist, these words start to lose all sense of meaning. It's a whole vocabulary of words. I mean, the word safe doesn't mean anything anymore. If you were to sell someone in the general public about, well, we need to make our university safe, they probably think you mean having lights in the car park at night so people can see where they're going. They don't think. They don't think that means safe from opinions or safe.
Right. How about if they make it safe from ISIS murderers? And of course, if you say that, how dare you?
Of course.
Even though one of them just ran over and tried to stab 9 people. I mean.
Yeah, and somehow the media took 24 hours they were still saying after 24 hours that they might never know what the motive was. Even though all you had to do was read his Facebook page.
Right. What are they talking about? We're not going to get a post hoc, post-mortem psychoanalytic credo? What are they talking about? What do they need?
Yeah.
It's absurd. Anyway, but you can't speak about that kind of safety. That puts you on the wrong side. I mean, I really want people at Ohio State and other universities to be safe from potential murderers and allow me to use my tongue.
Yeah.
How's that? Not, to talk. Strictly to talk. That's it. I didn't mean I'm going to cut you with it. I'm just going to talk. Okay?
So how does not only, maybe to bring this conversation back around, how does this work out for you, someone who doesn't have tenure, which I know is in some cases a force field, although even that, we'll see how Jordan Peterson's situation pans out. But even tenure there's no guarantee of sort of academic freedom.
Right.
So
I fear for that guy. Yeah.
So how about your situation? How do you think that'll play out, if you can even talk about that? And then how about just the situation in general? I mean, does it have to get much worse before it gets better? Or
okay, let me take those one at a time here. I ended up getting a promotion while I was on leave, and I had applied for it last April or so, and it actually came through, and I got a promotion. I'm a full professor now,
Right.
and I got a fairly handsome raise to go with it.
And
They
a
acted
holiday.
and a holiday. But I'm convalescing. I'm convalescing.
Yes, that's
I'm
right.
having a lot of convalescence here. Okay. um, so it's all the only thing that makes me nervous is actually stepping back into the office. Actually, to be real frank, and to kind of I think human beings have a sort of genetically programmed uh, horror about being shunned. I don't think
Shamed,
humans.
yeah.
I don't think humans like being shunned. I think it's a long term. I mean, I think it has a deep history for human beings shunning. Probably goes way back into our travel paths,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, my biggest concern is being shunned or being treated weirdly, or even worse than that. Hatred being spewed at me in the hall or whatever. I'm almost ironically thinking about asking for a safe space office from the social justice warriors because they scare me so much. So the irony is they're producing the need for what they recommend.
Well, I guess it keeps them in business, doesn't it? It's like feminists.
Yeah.
If you can keep redefining the definition of rape or sexual assault or sexual harassment, then you can keep making it look like it's a big problem, and then then you're employed for forever.
Then you need 5 more administrators to do it. So one for each type, But so that's in my situation. I just got it renewed. I got it, so that gives me a 5-year contract. I'm on long-term contracts. I'm full professor now. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that they'll try to run me out when I go up for renewal next time.
Right.
I don't know. Although, quite frankly, that I have published way more than my colleagues. Sorry, guys, but it's true. Take a look at my website. What else was I going to say? About the whole scenario, I don't feel very sanguine about it, to be honest with you. Because if I'm the only person in a massive university like NYU that's ever done what I've done here. Yeah. Nobody else has ever spoken about this. Everyone else is either, scared to death, or else they're down with it, I guess.
Well, I think that's another question I had. Sorry, was that surely you can't be the only one that has these types of feelings on that campus. There must be people who are just being quiet because they want a quiet life. They don't want their position to be affected or in jeopardy in any way. So, right. I mean, do you know of colleagues or even people who are not in your faculty but other faculties that have similar thoughts to you but just won't come out and say anything?
I had one person come out of the closet. To me personally, I can't give their name, of course, because I swore secrecy.
Yep.
But that's it. One out of the whole University of NYU. But I don't, and no one else has said another word to me from the university. Like, no other professors came out and either excoriated me, so I didn't get anything.
Yeah.
They probably, I don't know. They probably think the worst. Who knows? But
it's frightening because I don't want to make it be melodramatic or anything, but I mean, the Nazis were not a majority in their country in the 30s. Right. It's largely a problem of the silent majority that stay silent, and then all of a sudden you have this regime, and then because if people are too silent now, that's only in the university. In the general public, they're not. But that's the way it starts, isn't it? And I'm sorry.
But of course, they're going to say that the danger is not them or the SJWs, but the alt-right. And I mean, that just doesn't that doesn't stand the empirical test of reality. The alt-right is not metastasizing and hegemonic in the university, across the country and in Canada, and I guess in Australia as well. Yeah. And I've heard the UK. It is not the alt-right that's running the show, folks. It is this other type of people. This is social justice warrior left. Mm-hmm. And they are totalitarian to the core, I think. Do you think that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the signs are there, all the evidence are there. I mean, the if you don't agree with us, it's not they're not even willing to have a conversation. It's not even,
No,
you are a bigot, I am morally superior to you, and you must shut up. And especially if you are in one of the privileged groups that we have identified. And if even if you aren't, so even if you're Milo Yiannopoulos, who's a gay man, but he's a gay conservative, well, he's not in the right category. So we have to
that's right.
shut him up. If you're a black conservative like Larry Elder or Thomas Sowell or someone like that, well, there's two ways to deal with people like that. You either call them an Uncle Tom, or you just ignore them
Right.
altogether, and you don't give them a
Right.
platform. That's, or conservative women. I mean, they go on. Feminists are so, oversensitive, just hypersensitive about any criticism of a woman as misogyny. But if you're a conservative woman, I mean, think about, even if you don't like her, Ann Coulter. Think about the kind of
Yeah.
crap she gets. I
Oh,
mean,
she gets a lot of vicious stuff
yeah,
hurled her way. I mean, they make all these comments that would be called transphobic if it were directed at a leftist or a liberal person,
sure,
right? They say shit about her Adam's apple and stuff like that. That is
yeah.
real, that's okay. But
Mm-hmm.
if you say stuff like that about, that's very transphobic,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, we had a journalist here in Australia describe Melania Trump as Barbie doll, fake face and fake bust, and all these kinds of just attacks on her appearance. I mean, and she's a stunning looking woman, but
Right.
these kind of attacks would not be acceptable about any woman on the left. But because, I mean, and she, who knows where her political center is? She's probably not of the right anyway. It's just the fact that
Right.
she's
It's
married to a
not.
guy. I mean, and Donald Trump is not really of the right. I mean, Donald Trump is
No,
a
it's
sort of
not
a
really, actually.
unique creature, but he's just because he's Republican. But she's for attack, and so I think the lesson is here that it's not about the principle for these people. It's about the side, right? There are no,
What side you're on.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
not
right.
about principles. It's not.
And
That's
it doesn't even matter. All you have to do is reproduce the right memes and you're okay. You can come into their tent and they'll let you be there. But if you say anything else, and of course they don't have any answers except these memes, As I said, they just multiply memes upon
yeah.
meme upon meme. There's no rational thought. It's not about an argument.
No, no, because they have all the answers. Because that's what moral
Yeah.
authoritarians. That's how they
That-
exert themselves.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not sanguine because the numbers are low of any kind of opposition. And then with Trump now, they're going to be saying that he is, in fact, MIT just put out a statement today, or was it yesterday, some philosopher, they're trying to get the faculty to sign on to the statement against Trump's incursions against intellectual freedom or academic freedom. Isn't that ironic? I mean, what academic freedom are they talking about?
Yeah. I don't. Where is he? How has he attacked intellect? I mean, I haven't heard anything. Yes, he's a climate science denier, I think, or at least he's changed his position on that. But I mean, where's his attacks on academic freedom?
I don't see it.
Yeah.
That's what they're claiming, and they're putting out a statement, and they're asking everybody to sign this statement at MIT. Like 400 have signed it, I guess, so far. See, now there would be a case where I probably wouldn't sign it because I looked at the statement and I think it's overlooking the fact or the real danger that is already existing inside the universities, and that has been for years. Why would I sign a statement about Trump? This is not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about you.
Exactly. Yes, they're all worried about Trump, the man who hasn't actually done anything yet, hasn't pulled any levers of power, but that no sort of ability to look at what has Obama done. I mean, what about Title IX and things like this? I mean, that's done more to restrict freedom and access to education than probably anything Trump's about to propose.
Yeah. In any case, I don't see why they don't understand that they're looking at, they are the danger that they're referring to,
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. It's just a mind-blowing thing that they could actually be now all of a sudden asking for protection of their academic freedom as if it's been granted all along to others or anybody besides themselves. I mean, it's just really, they just don't even see that they're basically under a particular ideology and expects everyone else to be under it as well. And if they're not, they don't count. They're not a free speaker.
Yeah, and it's a little bit amazing. I think it speaks to the depth of the echo chamber that this election of Trump is a direct repudiation of this kind of, you have to fall in line with us. If you don't, you're basically an uneducated bigot who doesn't understand. And instead of this election being a sort of a wake-up call, and a few people have, I think people like Bill Maher has alluded to this, and he's on the left, but he's called out identity politics. Even Bernie Sanders, whether he actually meant it or not, actually said something against identity politics the other day. But the vast majority of people in the academy, they're just doubling down. They're
totally.
Not, yeah.
I mean, and I've said this myself. I said this particular identitarian left is producing the identitarian right that they so abhor.
Yeah. Yep.
They are actually producing the alt-right.
Of course, it's a direct response, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if we could end this on I'll give you maybe an optimistic scenario and see what you think of this.
Good.
And it was something that came out of the Jordan Peterson interview that I think you saw with Joe Rogan, where he talked about the university, moving out of the university, that actual real learning will happen because you don't need the physical space, that it can go online. And if you look at Jordan Peterson, since this whole thing erupted at Toronto University, has a massive following. His Patreon.
I see that.
Now he's got a tremendous support. People are really, really behind him. And perhaps that is an alternative. That if you take the legitimacy away from the universities and you can attract people, and he talked about getting accreditation. So you have to have high standards, obviously, for these kinds of things. That maybe that's a way to weaken the power of the university. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've actually thought a lot about this, and I've actually had some other people write to me about this. Cliff Kincaid, who's actually a sort of a right-winger, but he had very similar thoughts that he wrote about in a book. A title escapes me, but the idea being basically, we have now access to, knowledge, or I should say information is no longer the problem. And professors are not necessary in order to be the fountainheads of information.
Yep.
Their role now is something different. Their role is to be interlocutors, but also guides perhaps to knowledge, but certainly not the source of knowledge any longer. So this does totally destabilize the university as the source of education, or higher education itself. Definitely with the internet. I think the digital revolution has made enormous incursions and so forth into this realm. I thought a lot about it, and one of the main issues, I think, is the question of whether embodiment is necessary in education. To what degree do we need to be embodied in educational settings or the educational moment? And some fields, I think, require it, while others don't. So, but I do think we can go a long way with this kind of with the digital tools that we are now entrusted with, and that we could expand greatly, I think. Indeed. In fact, I think virtual reality will lend us other tools. It'll make the study of, for example, anatomy or whatever, so much more amazing. We can just walk through the body, things like that. I think these are all. This is all going to shift things, and I think it's eroding the authority of the university. And of course, on top of that, academics are eroding their own authority by doing idiotic things like writing papers on feminism and glaciers. I think this is all going to become, a real, like the print revolution changed all kinds of authority, the church, and so forth
Sure.
and so on. Similarly, yes, this is gonna. We don't know. I don't know how far it's going to upend the academy. And I'm not really hanging on. I'm looking very curiously as to how this is going to go.
Yeah.
But I think I'd like to be on the right side of history on this one.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. Well, maybe let me have a look here. We're up to just over an hour now, so maybe we'll cut it here. Maybe that's a good note to end on. And I think, did I see right that you will be on Gad Sad's The Sad Truth coming up?
Yeah, on Monday at 10.
On Monday at 10, so people should look out for that. And if you follow Gad Sad, you'll probably see it anyway. And hopefully you can get a little more heat on your situation, or maybe you don't want heat, but at least attention and some support. So I just want to encourage people to go and find out about Michael's writings and publications and support him in any way you can. And I just want to thank you for coming on, Michael, and sharing your story.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.